Thanks for joining us today for the webinar about Thales. It's specifically about identity and access management because, as you know, hackers don't hack anymore, they log in. But before we start, we would like to introduce our team at Exclusive Networks. We have a team that works a lot with Thales. First of all, our senior vendor marketeer, Davina. Cedric, who's our security engineer, who can answer every technical question you have, really every. And then we also have our inside sales, Nathan, and I am Gronia, and I'm the business development manager for Thales at Exclusive Networks. So now I will give the floor at Cedric, who will explain everything about Thales and IAM.
Yeah, thanks, Gronia. Good morning, everyone. So before we get started about the topic of today, I just want to take a moment to introduce Thales itself as a vendor. So you might know them already because they are in different types of industries, from aeronautics, space to defense, and of course, cybersecurity. And it's on the cybersecurity part I want to focus because Thales is a European company. They are based in France, but they have global presence in more than 86 countries. And what for me is always important for a cybersecurity vendor is their R&D budget, right? For research and development. And as you might know, Thales has basically two cybersecurity pillars. The first one is really focusing on data security. So think at discovering data, classifying data, encrypting data, and managing encryption keys. And then the second pillar is really about the identity security itself, where we can basically distinguish two main streamlines. The first one is what we call workforce identity access management. That's what we're going to talk today about. So it's about protecting your employees from the modern identity threats. But there is also something called CIAM, which stands for Customer Identity Access Management. So I just want to highlight this because many people don't know that Thales have those two solutions in identity space. So let's go back to the topic of today's session, right? We didn't just choose this title because it looks pretty fancy. It's really because it's true, right? Hackers don't hack anymore, they log in. What I mean by that is a good hacker is someone lazy, right? He wants to find the best and easiest way to get into a system without having to spend too much time, spend too much resources, etc. And the easiest way to do that, well, guess what? Is just by logging into your systems. So what are we going to discuss today? Today, I want to, let's say, talk about 5 minutes about what is the problem, what are the challenges, and how those threats are evolving in the modern landscape, right? And then I will just show you in action one of the demos we have where we will hack, or hack is a big word, but we will show you how we can bypass modern Microsoft MFA technology. So don't be scared, but it's just as a teaser to show you how easy it is for the attackers nowadays to get in. Then I will briefly touch on the identity lifecycle, and then we will move on to one of the pieces inside identity lifecycle, which is identity and access management. And that's where I will presenting you the Thales solution, which is named SafeNet Trusted Access. And I will also try to showcase you some of the demos and walking you through the platform depending on the time we have. At the end of the session, Gronia will show you the licensing model and how you can acquire this technology. And of course, how we as Exclusive Networks, your cybersecurity distributor, how we can help you to provide those services. Of course, call to action. If you have any questions, use the Q&A tab. If you have any feedback or any thoughts you want to share, please use the chat as well. With that being said, let's dive into the first topic, which is understanding the problem, right? And the problem, as I said, it's really about the identity, and more specifically, identity theft. Because think about it, what is the easiest way in an IT or even in IoT and OT systems to get it? The challenge here is to make sure that we can protect the identities to avoid people just being able to access our resources. And that can be like, a web application, it can be a database, it can be a management portal if you're a system administrator, right? So the concept is simple. When you log in, you have access to a lot of sensitive data. Maybe you can perform certain actions that can have a devastating effect for your organization. So it doesn't really matter on what system you are. The way you get into the system is by authenticating, right? And we want to make sure we can identify and authenticate you in a safe way. Let's try to understand how the threat landscape evolves. And I really like the gone fishing because this is typically something I use when I'm out of office. I say, hey guys, I'm gone fishing. And actually it's true because I like fishing, like the real sport, but also because I've been looking and let's say doing some research about phishing attacks. And I just want to use this slide to highlight in 2025, there were of course a lot of cybersecurity incidents and attacks. And the ones we can see here on this screen, they all have one thing in common. It's the attack started with an identity theft. And an identity theft can be something simple like the reuse of a username and a password. It can be bypassing a multi-factor technology. It can be something like an account takeover or social engineering techniques that are used to basically get into the systems by stealing the identity. And if you go back to the MITRE attack framework, you know, those tactics, techniques, and procedures, the very first stage of an attack is usually reconnaissance. And reconnaissance is used to basically get into your system, finding the initial access. And in the past, initial access was something very hard for hackers to do because you need a lot of knowledge. You might need already access to some systems to be able to brute forces, etc. Nowadays, initial access is really about finding credentials. And when we start talking about finding credentials, I don't know if you knew that, but a lot of information about you and me, about our communities, about the companies that we're working for is available online. And a lot of people always tend to think that that information that hackers are using is in the dark web. And that's actually not true. If we take a look at this picture, when we go to Google and we type whatever Google search, well, most of the time we only have access to 4% of, let's say, the available information out there. But if we go a bit more deeper, we start using queries and filters, well, we can basically access up to 94% of all data sitting out on the internet. And that data is important for hackers because they can use that to build and craft phishing campaigns. And when we think about phishing, well, most of the time people think about, you know, that email you get from a support company that looks like Microsoft, but that's not Microsoft. But in fact, what I want to highlight here on this slide is that phishing is not only about sending a message through email. There are many other communication and collaboration tools that can be used to basically send a message to someone. Think about Microsoft Teams. I can chat nowadays with partners. When I'm joining in a meeting, I can even chat as we are doing today. In this webinar, we can chat with each other. So I can share some links or files with you. What if I can manage to, let's say, hide a malicious URL inside those files or messages? Also think about generative AI. If you go to ChatGPT and you ask him a question, if he returns back with the URL and that URL itself is malicious and redirecting you to a phishing website, well, you are screwed, right? So I want really to highlight the fact that phishing is not only about email. Also, phishing comes with a lot of other, let's say, tactics and techniques used by attackers. The one that I want to highlight here is social engineering, because social engineering is really very easy nowadays with GenAI. You can basically ask ChatGPT to write the perfect phishing email for you. It will be perfectly written in English or any other language you want, right? So just keep that in mind. Now, enough of, let's say, walking through the slides. Let's move on to the interactive part. Let me actually show you how easy it is to bypass Microsoft multi-factor authentication. And the reason why I'm using Microsoft here is just because I'm sure we all use Microsoft. I hope it will create like the wow effect. Of course, we can use the same technique and same tool for other applications. Disclaimer, I'm using this tool and showing you this only for learning purpose and for cybersecurity defenses and not as the intent to really perform attacks outright. And I don't want you to be hackers as well. So be aware of that. Don't use this tool in your own environment or to be malicious against your family or friends. Cool. What is the tool that I'm be using? It's called Evelgenix. It's an open source tool, so it means it's available out there. You can download it for free, and it's really simple to use. With a simple command, as you can see here, I'm able to start the tool, and with another simple command, I'm able to configure the tool. So very straightforward. What is the goal of this tool? Well, I will be performing a man-in-the-middle attack on a Microsoft application. So we all know when you go to Microsoft, you have to, the Office 365 portal, for instance, you have to log in. Once you're logged in, you can basically access other applications, such as Word, OneDrive, Microsoft Teams, and so on. So my goal here is to define the target as being Microsoft Office 365 portal so that I can then steal the identity of my user. Let's have a look at that in action. So I hope you can all see this video where I show you that I have configured a couple of domains, so login.microsoftonline.com, and I'm actually creating a fake URL, and this fake URL will be used to intercept all the traffic, including the authentication information and authentication cookie. And while I'm intercepting all this traffic, I will also be redirecting all this traffic to Microsoft so that the user actually doesn't really understand that there is something going on. I will pause here just to emphasize a thing. Do you recognize this, this UI? I hope you all recognize this web interface. It's the Microsoft login page. This is not something I have coded. This is not something I have recreated. I'm just using the tool to do it for me. So it's very straightforward to use. Now, if you have a look here on top, you can see it's not going to login.microsoftonline.com. It's actually using one of my own custom crafted domains. So this is typically something where if you have proper awareness and you have educated your customers or your employees, well, they should be able to immediately see that there is something wrong. But beside the URL here, there is nothing that can help us say that this is potentially a phishing attempt. So as usual, you try to log in into the application. What do? Well, you provide your username, your password. And then you would say, okay, but at this point, my administrator did it right because he configured multi-factor authentication. And that's true. Look, I receive a push notification on my smartphone. I even have to enter a secret number, which is 73. And then finally, I'm being connected. So now I have been authenticated. And as you can see, after authentication, I am redirected to Microsoft, the official website and portal, where the user can access his resources. Right? So from a user perspective, it doesn't really look like there is something going on. It doesn't even look like there was a hack going on. But from an attacker point of view, this is key. You might have seen here already, this is the Evelgenix tool, the malicious tool I'm using for this attack. I was able to intercept the username and the password of my target. And more importantly, I was also able to steal the authentication token, including the authentication cookie. And this is what is shown now on the screen. So what I will do is I will copy this authentication token, and I will go to my own browser, the hacker browser, let's say that way. And when I go to the browser, all I have to do is go to office365.com, click on sign in. I don't have to either bother by entering the username and the password. No, I will just be injecting this authentication cookie as shown here. So I click on import cookie. I paste the cookie I just stolen from the previous step. I click on import. Look at this. I will just simply refresh the page. That's it. I am in. I managed to bypass. So not only I managed to steal his password, but now I managed to bypass the authentication and the security, identity security part of Microsoft, and I have access to all the applications inside Office 365. Pretty crazy. What I think is really scary here is the fact that it doesn't really require a lot of knowledge to set it up. And most importantly, it doesn't cost you anything because the tool is free. In 5 minutes, you can set it up. There is not a lot of resources required to perform this attack. Now, of course, when we talk about attacks, it's very cool and very nice to show. I'm here to spend the next 15 minutes to show you how we can defend against those types of attacks. Well, first of all, there is a simple method which is which is named FIDO keys. And 1 year ago, I did a dedicated FIDO webinar about how it works and how it can protect against such types of attacks. So I won't go too much in detail, but I just want to highlight here that we have on our website a dedicated guide about how you can integrate such a FIDO key in your Microsoft environment. What I want to highlight here as well is that the FIDO keys themselves that we have at Exclusive, they are built by Thales, and some of them are even made in Europe, manufactured in Europe. So what is the result? I'm actually now showing you the same flow. So I'm trying to authenticate against this malicious URL. We can see that on top. It's my custom URL. But at the moment I enter my username and password, the system is now configured to use FIDO keys. So instead of using the MFA prompt and the magic number, I'm supposed to enter my FIDO key right now. And you can see I can't even proceed. The system itself is detecting, and that's how the FIDO protocol is working. Again, I will not go too much in detail, but the FIDO protocol is basically identifying that there is a man-in-the-middle attack, and therefore the connection is being broken. And we can see that here. Sorry, but we're having trouble to signing in. And this is basically not a backend issue. This is a security issue. The FIDO key detects there is a man in the middle, and therefore it stops the transaction. So you can see with like 6 steps on how to configure a FIDO key, you are able to block those kinds of attacks. Just to prove you that it works with the normal FIDO key when you go to the official website of Microsoft. So now I'm going to the website of Microsoft, which is the official one. And when I enter username and password, I can now select my FIDO key. You can see that here on the bottom. So I insert my security key, I touch the key, and I provide my PIN code, and then I will be able to authenticate securely to Microsoft or any other application without the possibility to have a man in the middle or any kind of phishing attacks. Okay, cool. So I hope that kind of makes sense. If you have any questions, I will just try to bring my Teams chat here again to make sure that if there is a question, I can answer it as we go. Cool. I'm trying to go to the next slide. There we go. Always fun when PowerPoint is crashing. Cool. Yeah. Cool. Identity lifecycle. So as I said at the beginning, identity and access management is only a single piece into the identity security space. And this is something that has been regrouped into what we call the identity lifecycle. It's a framework that helps you identify different stages and where you need to be proactive into your identity security. So it all starts with managing secure access, making sure that your users have secure authenticators to log in, making sure you have access control so that you are logging every access attempt and that you can eventually identify anomalies or misbehaviors. And then, of course, it's all about continuously monitoring the state of your identities across the entire environment, right? So in this specific framework, we will now only focus on the identity and access management part, and I will show you how we can, with Thales, very easily and rapidly enable FIDO authentication. Not only I will show you how we can enable FIDO authentication, but I will also show you how we can provide passwordless authentication. Because one of the biggest threats with phishing attacks is we want to steal your password. Because if we can steal your password, many chances are you are reusing that passwords for other applications and services, right? So that's really the goal of attackers here when they try to steal your password. So instead of showing you this with slides, if you don't mind, I will try to show you that live. Let me see where my screen is gone. There it is. Cool. This is the SafeNet Trusted Access portal, so we can see everything is customizable. I'm now connecting to the admin portal, which I use for another demo. So you can customize everything as you go. I log in as an administrator. You can see he's now asking me for a passcode. I will leave it empty, and I will be prompted with what we call a grid sure token. It's one of the software tokens that Thales is providing to the customers, and it allows you to basically authenticate using a pattern, right? So all you have to do is remember a pattern, and that's it. So I don't need a physical key. I don't need a long password that is hard to remember and of course potentially interceptable, right? So of course this grid sure token is one of the many tokens you can use to access one of the applications behind SafeNet Trusted Access, just as an example. Okay, cool. So we discussed about the identity lifecycle, and I just said it's also very much more than just multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, and EIM in general. It's all about also being able to monitor and track down anomalies. And of course, the Thales technology is providing you that. So we can see audit logs, which is all the logs from an administrator point of view, but also user activity logs. And then we can find all kinds of details about the authenticators itself. So we can see I used my smartphone a couple of days ago to authenticate using biometrics to access the admin portal. Now, the thing I wanted to show you here is when you start building an integration, we talked about it at the beginning, you might want to secure access to a network, such as VPN agents, maybe a web application or SaaS application, your private resources, etc. So it all starts with an integration with that service. And what is cool is that Thales has a pretty big database of approved integrations. So if I look, for instance, for Microsoft, you can see here we have a couple of Microsoft integrations that are available out of the box, right? What I want to show you as well is that, of course, you can add custom integrations that does support SAML or OpenID Connect. But what I want to emphasize is that the setup is really straightforward, very simple to use. And even if you don't really know where you get started, you can always click on the help documentation. And what is unique here is that this help documentation is not redirecting you to a generic page. No, it's actually redirecting you to the solution you are trying to integrate. So here we have a full guide of how to integrate, for instance, Thales SafeNet Trusted Access with FortiSASE, right? So it's very straightforward and very easy for administrators to onboard new applications, either applications that are available in the catalog or custom ones. And now it all starts. Once the integration is set up, you want to make sure you have secure authentication. And that's something you can define in what we call security policies. So a security policy can be something very simple like this one. I want to make sure that I allow all users to those two applications, and I want them to use either a password or one-time password. This is a simple policy, but you can make that policy a bit more specific. You can say, hey, no, I don't want to use the password anymore. The user is only allowed to use a UTP. So you can see how easy it is with Thales to provide passwordless authentication. All you have to do is remove the password as an allowed authenticator. And there you go. You might be familiar with Microsoft conditional-based access. We also support those features at Thales, and this is called scenarios, which means I can now build specific scenarios based on the network, the device, if it is a domain joint system, and so on. So let me walk you through a couple of those examples. So I'm allowing access to a private application, but I'm saying that if the device is known, a specific operating system, in my demo, I use the Windows 11, well, then the user is not allowed to use this OTP, but it should be using a FIDO key. And of course, you can modify authenticators as you wish. What I'm also doing here is I can say, hey, if the user is inside Belgium and he's not changing from a country, he's allowed. But I could also negate this policy. I could say, if my user is not in Belgium, or if my user is changing countries, I want to block the authentication. Or I still want to grant the authentication, but I want to make sure that the user is using true multi-factor by combining multiple authenticators. So here I could say, hey, you need to use a one-time password, and in addition to that, you need to use a FIDO key. So we have 2 authenticators required, and so on and so forth. So you can have a look at anonymizers. So typically, if you are using a proxy or a Tor browser to log in somewhere, and you can also put some restriction based on the network IP addresses. So I hope this gives you a clear view of how you can set up those policies and how easy it isn't for an administrator to have a single pane of glass to, first of all, create the policies, create the integrations, but also have a look at the logs. So just as an example here, I'm showing you one of my users. This user is a synchronized user. It means it has been synchronized from my local Active Directory. This user has 4 applications assigned. It's part of a specific group called Netscope. I can have a look at the different access attempts over time, and I can also see the different authenticators configured. And in this case, it's not best practice. He only has a domain password and not a secure authentication token. Cool. Let's go back to the slide deck if he allows me. Cool. Yeah. Again, if there is any question on that, feel free to ask. Now, one thing I want to highlight here is that FIDO is typically something that is done through self-enrollment. So self-enrollment is supported by Thales, which basically means that the user can enroll his token himself without an administrator needed or someone else that needs to give him access or explaining how to do it. It's very straightforward, and we can see that here. By simply providing the information and following the guide, you are able to add your token. Again, I have a dedicated session on FIDO authentication. So if you want to know more, we will share the URL, or you can go to our YouTube channel to find more details. One of the things I want to highlight before we move on to the use cases is the different authenticators that are supported. Again, we have software tokens and hardware tokens. When we talk about hardware tokens, what is unique here is that Thales is manufacturing those tokens. That's important. So one of the hardware tokens is, for instance, the FIDO key, but there is also PKI, so public key infrastructure capable hardware devices, where you typically use certificates to authenticate. And you can even combine multiple of those methods together. We can see that here with the ID Prime FIDO smart card. So it's a smart card, which means there is a certificate on it. You can use that certificate using the chip set, but also using NFC. And as we can see on the top of this card, it also supports FIDO authentication. So we have all in one. Another method is the eToken 5000, which is basically, it looks like a USB stick, but actually it contains your certificate. So a very safe and secure way to authenticate. And maybe something I haven't yet told you about is that not only Thales is manufacturing those tokens in most of the time in Europe, but also they have the highest level of certifications. Think about FIPS. We have some of those security compliances, such as this eToken, which is FIPS 140-2 up to level 3 compliant. That's also really unique on the market. Okay, cool. Let's try to convince you how easy it is to use SafeNet Trusted Access across different use cases. So let me show you a couple of those use cases where we can use SafeNet Trusted Access to manage the authentication, as I showed you with the application integration. It can be a private application, cloud application, a VPN, doesn't matter. As long as it does support SAML or OpenID Connect, you will be able to integrate that in a few seconds. And then, of course, you build your policies, you have access to the logs, so you can do some risk assessments, you have context about the authentication transaction, so you will be able to mitigate against account takeovers and other types of attacks. Now, remember, I started the demo by showing you how we can attack a Microsoft environment. I'm not bashing on Microsoft. I really believe in the strategy of being better together. What I mean by that is Thales can very easily integrate with Microsoft. Within a single click, you can federate your Microsoft domain. What does that mean? It means that all the authentication requests to Microsoft applications will be now redirected to SafeNet Trusted Access for authentication with a single click. Very simple. Another more granular approach is that you say, hey, I don't want to federate, so not all applications are sent to Thales, but only the ones I specify, or the one application you specify for a specific group. So you can see here two integration methods between Thales Safety Trusted Access and Microsoft. Now, let's talk about use cases. First use case, your users. You want to make sure you can very easily onboard users. And also you want to make sure that when a new joiner or someone is leaving the company, that it's automatically being integrated with your EAM solution. And that's exactly what we can provide at Thales with simple and documented steps. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there is also self-enrollment that is supported. The self-enrollment is done through the user portal, and the user portal also allow you to do like basic changes of, for instance, your password. If your user needs to change his password, he can do it himself. If you want to reset the token, he can do that as well, etc., etc. Another use case is multi-factor on endpoints. If you start working, I hope that you open up your computer and that the first thing you need to do is authenticate. And instead of using a 6-number digit or 4-number digit or a password, you can use Thales Safe and Trusted Access to again perform the authentication for you. And then we have a couple of methods here. Depending if you're online or offline, we will be able to securely authenticate you to that device. The third use case, which I think is really an interesting one, is MFA on RDP sessions. This is also something that's possible with SafeNet Trusted Access. It's using an agent, the same agent that we can use also to secure the endpoints, but now we are using that for RDP access. So when you are connecting through RDP, you will first authenticate to your domain services, and then Thales will kick in and say, hey, dear user, you need to provide your multi-factor based on your policies. So again, very straightforward, single solution, and again, a single policy to enforce that. Now, what about VPNs? VPNs or SASE agents or SSE agents, right? It doesn't really matter. As long as the VPN does support radius authentication, SAML, or OpenID Connect, you will be able to very rapidly integrate with it. An example here is integration with 40 clients. So if you go with 40 clients, you can either use the old way of doing with radius authentication, or you can go for a more modern approach, which is using SAML protocol for authentication. And we can see here that on the left side, I was being able to authenticate my user securely using Mobile Pass, which is the mobile application used for secure authentication. Now, if you use Radius, I wouldn't recommend you to use Radius, but if you still have some use cases or systems that require that, just note that it's pretty limited in its capabilities due to the Radius limitations, and that the two methods we can use as authenticators are either the mobile application on your smartphone or a hardware one-time password, as you can see on the right side. So hardware OTP is basically it's an algorithm that's generating a 6-digit number that you can use to authenticate. Now, if you go for a more modern approach, so either SAML or OpenID Connect integrations, well, then, of course, all the features that I showed you today becomes available. So you have single pane of glass, policies, conditional-based access, single sign-on to improve the user experience. As I showed you, with a simple click, you can enable or disable password authentication. And of course, FIDO and many other authenticators can be added. One of the last use cases I want to share with you, which I think is the most important one, if you're an administrator and you have access to databases, CRM systems, firewalls, whatever, an admin console, make sure you have MFA enabled and make sure you use phishing resistant technologies such as FIDO keys. So this is also where you can use Thales to not only integrate with customer-facing applications, but also with administrative portals and other services as you require. Last use case, maybe one of the most important ones, SaaS. Most of the applications nowadays are made available in the cloud, which means that everyone can access them. So I hope you have a very strong authentication configured for those. An example is the Office 365 application I showed you, and how easy it isn't for a hacker to just fake you, trigger you into a phishing campaign and steal your authentication cookie. So that brings me back to this slide where I hope I made my point that with SafeNet Trusted Access, you can provide secure authentication, the full identity lifecycle, maybe not every single piece of the identity lifecycle, but most of them can be covered with this single solution. And as we saw, there is a broad variety of authenticators that we can use, either hardware and software. One word about the infrastructure before I hand over back to Groenja, and I'm sorry that I'm going a bit over time due to the issue with PowerPoint. SafeNet Trusted Access is available as a service, so a SaaS technology, or a SaaS offering, I should say. Of course, we are using European data centers for that, but there is also an on-premise variant. And I think the on-premise, so it's called SaaS PCE, it's private cloud edition, is really important nowadays if we see what happens geopolitical, but also when it comes to, do you trust the cloud? Or what is your way back to, what if the cloud fails tomorrow? How do you guarantee secure authentication? And that's really a unique component of SafeNet Trusted Access, where you can use this on-premise appliance to basically perform exactly the same capabilities as I just discussed today. With that, I want to hand over back to Groenja, but before I do so, everything what I showed you today, you can try it for free. It's really easy to set up. We can provide you evaluations, and also another call to action. We have a pretty nice workshop, at least I think it's a pretty nice workshop, where I can I'm happy to invite you to do a capture the flag together with us, where you will be integrating all of those use cases I showed you today. With that, thank you so much, and I give you the word back, Groenja.
Thank you very much, Cedric. That was very, very clear. Now, I know it's a lot to take in, but we can help. As already mentioned, we have services at Exclusive, and we can do them, we can help you in Belgium and Luxembourg, but also on a global level, like technical pre-sale services, consultancy, but we can also provide you with trainings on the STAR platform or the MFA setup. And as mentioned here, the SafeNet Trusted Access rollout, which is very easy, but I can imagine not for everybody, because for Cedric, it's very easy, but sometimes you need some help. So we can help you in any way. Now, as you know, we are the sole distributor for Thales, so we can make all offers, but we also have our Exclusive on Demand. This is a subscription platform where we as a distributor will be the MSSP for you. Now, the main goal here is to provide you a specific platform where you can order Thales's, the STAR licenses, but you don't have to look at the volume. You can order one, you can order 100. Really, it's mostly for below 500 users. You can go above, of course, but the goal is to make sure that you can buy them one by one if you want to. It's very easy. You have an effortless onboarding, which I will do. It's very easy, very clear, simple. But then you have the flexible licensing. It's really the operation is simplified. You can upscale, downscale every month. It's a monthly payment model, so you don't have to buy in advance for 1 year or whatever. No, it's really monthly. You can upscale, downscale. You will have access on the Thales platform, which Cedric will really explain to you. It's very easy as well. And it's really customer optimization and value add. We want to give you through this platform. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask us. I will not go into depth because I think this is quite clear about the platform. If you have any questions about it, don't hesitate. I want to thank you for being here today, and I hope everything was clear. Thank you very much.